How do you measure the intrinsic value? And boomers love that phrase, the intrinsic value of something that anyone, anywhere in the world, regardless of location, net worth, or background, can use? Because that question stops a lot of people. I also actually think a lot of people aren't even asking that question. And I think it comes down to people measuring something like Bitcoin with a ruler instead of what it really does, which is a zero barrier to entry for anyone, anywhere in the world, and they can participate. And that's the best thing about Bitcoin. And that's what we're talking about today. Start with the phrase itself. You hear it consistently. Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, and they say it with confidence. Like that settles the conversation, and there's nothing else that needs to be discussed. And it's such an old way of thinking, right? How do you measure something that anybody's allowed to participate in? And I think I don't want to say rich coming from people who have access to open banking systems where you can open a bank account from your phone sitting on your couch. It's narrow, I would say. But the people saying it the loudest are usually the people measuring Bitcoin against something like gold, like the dollar, like real estate or stocks. And every single time they make that comparison, it eventually breaks down because Bitcoin wasn't trying to be any of those things. They're just saying it is like this, but this is better than that. I'm hoping that makes sense. It borrows characteristics from many of them: fixed supply, like gold; transferable, like cash; programmable, like software, but it doesn't claim to be any of those, right? In my view, to be able to transact peer to peer to anyone across the planet without anybody's permission is its intrinsic value. And that can't be measured. And I think that's why a lot of people have trouble understanding it because they're so used to this old system that's been in place for so long. And that the idea of anything else coming along that is better or that gives people who, and I want to say this carefully, are not on the same level. Like, I think people in first world countries don't think about people in other parts of the world who don't have access to things that they have access to at any time of the day. So when you hold up Bitcoin against gold and say, but you can't make jewelry with it, you're right. You also can't send gold to your sister in the Philippines at 11 p.m. on a Sunday in 30 seconds. See, it's a different ruler, different measurement for something that's completely different, but has sort of the same characteristics. And money has never derived its value from what you can physically do with it. A dollar bill is cotton and linen, and you can't eat it. You can't build with it. The intrinsic value of a dollar in the physical sense is basically nothing, right? What gives money value is the agreement, the shared belief that this thing represents something, which is scarcity, reliability, portability, and that's it. That's what it's always been. Gold, on the other hand, worked for thousands of years, not because you could make circuit boards with it. That became much later. It was a different use for gold, much further in the future, but because everyone agreed it was scarce, hard to fake, and held its properties over time, durability. So when someone says Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, what they're actually saying, whether they realize it or not, is that they haven't yet joined the agreement. They haven't accepted the shared belief. And that's fine, I would say, but it's not a measurement problem with Bitcoin. It's a familiarity problem with something new and maybe something they don't fully understand. I just dropped a post the other day about the Kruger-Dunning effect. If you've ever heard of it, the less you know about something, the more confident you are about it. And the more you know about something, the more cautious you are about it. And I love that. And I think that's very applicable to Bitcoin and a lot of the Bitcoin conversations that go around online today. There's never been a fully decentralized peer-to-peer digital cash system before. There's never been that. Never once in human history has there been an option for people to opt out. So every ruler we picked to measure Bitcoin with was built before it existed. Of course, the measurements get murky and of course the comparisons fall short. That's why the debates never end. Critics measure it against things that have never tried to be, finding it lacking, and it's easy to do. And it's the same thing with a lot of altcoins. On the other hand, Bitcoin maximalists measure it against everything and declare it superior. Both camps are swinging rulers at something that keeps refusing to hold still. And I think that's so true. The confusion is understandable, but the confusion is not Bitcoin's problem to solve. Now, here's where I want to land with this. because I don't want this to be a philosophical debate or anything like that. There's something practical underneath all of it that matters more than intrinsic value ever will. And it will kill any of those debates, in my opinion. This is something I mentioned earlier: zero barrier to entry. And this, in my opinion, on a personal opinion, I've mentioned this in many videos before, is Bitcoin's biggest value. It's where most of its intrinsic value comes from. Anyone can join the Bitcoin network right now, today, regardless of where they live, how much money they have, what government is in power, what bank will or won't approve their account, what their credit score is, what their passport says, what their religion is. Bitcoin doesn't care. It's for everyone. No application, no approval process, no minimum balance, no government deciding if you qualify. You and anybody can just join. And what's even better, you can transact with them. And I love that. And once you can transact with anyone else on Earth who is also on the network, you can do that directly without asking permission from anyone in the middle. And that's the intrinsic value, in my opinion. So we just sit with that for a second. Just think about what I was saying earlier. We're using a ruler to measure something that hasn't been fully understood. And that's why, because the people measuring Bitcoin's intrinsic value are the ones that don't see where it provides the value to other people. And I hope that lands. That's just the way I kind of think about it in my head. There are 1.4 billion people on this planet who are unbanked, who have no access to a bank account, no access to financial services, no way to store value safely, send money internationally, participate in the global economy in any meaningful way. Not because they don't deserve it, because a system exists that was never built for them. Think about that. The system that we have is not built for billions of people out there, and we have easy first world problem access to it whenever we want. And Bitcoin wasn't made for these people specifically, but the design decisions made in 2008 created something that includes everyone, and that's important. By default, instead of excluding most people by design or location. So how do you put intrinsic value on that? And that's the question. For the people who dismiss Bitcoin because it doesn't fit their existing frameworks, they aren't stupid. They're using old tools for a new solution. The dollar was measured against gold and found wanting by people who didn't understand fiat. Email was measured against the postal service and found wanting by people who didn't understand networks. Bitcoin has been measured against everything that came before it by people who haven't yet felt the pain of the system it was built to replace. And some of us might. I've mentioned it before. One day, I woke up during Christmas and all my bank accounts are frozen. Some of the critics will never get there. Some of them won't. That's just how things work. It's how new things work. The moment Bitcoin clicked for me wasn't when I understand the technical architecture. I think you could go down that rabbit hole for years and still not fully get that light bulb moment. It wasn't when I read the white paper. It wasn't when I finished mastering Bitcoin or the Bitcoin standard. It was when I felt the weight of the existing system, the printing, the freezing, the gatekeeping, the permission asking to get your own money out of your own bank account, and realizing there was something that operated completely outside of it all. That's not a number on a spreadsheet, and that's not something you can put a valuation model on. But it's real and it matters. And for a lot of people around the world, it might be the most valuable thing that has ever existed. And I think in the future, it will for even more people. So the next time someone tells you that Bitcoin has no intrinsic value, don't get defensive. Don't pull out the stock to flow model or the scarcity or Bitcoin left on exchanges. Don't start listing use cases. Just ask them one question. How do you measure the intrinsic value of something that allows anybody in the world to join, regardless of where they were born, how much money they have, or who is in charge in their government? Then let them sit with that. If they don't understand the question, then that's their financial privilege showing. You don't need to convince them. I think you know the saying, you can lead a horse to water. I think that's the same with this. Until somebody who, like me and many of you, have felt the pressure of the traditional finance system or the unfairness of it, then you really start to try to look for a solution, an option to opt out. That's usually where the real conversations start. And I'm hoping that more people will see it. And unfortunately, I think we will in the future. I think the amount of money printing that's going on and physical irresponsibility and just the grip that the financial industrial complex has on governments and politicians and everything in general, I think more people are going to see the need for Bitcoin. And I'm hoping this channel is there for them. Anyways, I want to leave you with that. Thank you so much for being here. And as always, if you're going to buy Bitcoin, make sure you send it to cold storage. Peace out.